He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Hi, I'm Paul Roy. And just a word of warning, this series contains graphic descriptions of rescues and fatalities, as well as some spicy language. Although at times confronting, they are the unfiltered reality of the work of land search and rescue volunteers and those that have been rescued. So if unsettling personal stories affect you, a strong cup of tea might be in order. Episode 8, A Step Too Far.
If you wouldn't mind putting on these headphones. Yep.
Morning, Dave. How are you? Can you hear me? It's Paul here.
Yep.
I'm talking to Dave Vass, mountaineer, canyoner, daredevil and risk-taker. He was in Ep 1, if you remember, one of the SAR volunteers on Cascade Saddle, Helen and Donald's tragic tale.
And I remember Dave and I, having this what the fuck conversation about, who makes that call, to stop CPR. And I guess it fell upon us and Dave and said, listen, there's no point continuing. You've done an incredible job, but from our experience, we're not going to get this guy back.
Dave's been an active part of the search and rescue community. He's a rescuer. In this story, he's someone who got rescued.
At the end of the day, that was a result of sort of personal stuff in my life and really not being on the job at the time mentally.
Dave found himself stuck in the canyon.
We were rushing it. It was all a bit the wrong time of year to be doing it and, all that stuff.
Having leapt into a pool he thought was much deeper.
Again, that was actually quite a little thing. It wasn't a great big jump or anything. It was just a little jump. I just thought I was going to have to mill around and have a cold night and get dragged up the bank on ropes the next day, sort of thing.
That chance. Things got a damn side more complicated and dangerous than that. In the New Zealand backcountry, rivers pose one of the greatest threats. So much so that in the days before rivers and streams were bridged, drowning was known as the New Zealand death. There have been thousands of accidents, near misses and deaths in our rivers over the years. But today we hear of just one misadventure. Dave Vass has had an adventurous life, to put it mildly. Caving, rafting, canyoning, and a leading mountaineer. Attempting new and difficult climbs, often in winter, sometimes solo, and always seeking out the unknown.
I was actually born in Australia. Keep that quiet. My mum and dad, had the big OE in England and Europe, travelled around, got pregnant with me and didn't stay in the North Island until I left. And I came down for varsity / change of lifestyle. Took one look at the mountains and just went right on, this is me.
Dave went to Canterbury University in the early 80s, joined the Canterbury University Mountaineering Club, the CUTC, and like so many people before him, said goodbye to his degree.
I remember at varsity you'd sit in the library and read Mountain magazine, but I got completely sidetracked from a zoology and botany degree into a mountaineering degree. I was in totally good company at the CUTC. It was just a hotbed of enthusiasm. There was all these people there, and they're mostly big, hairy, beardy sort of guys, and they all looked so fabulously experienced. And I thought they were just like, mountaineering gods, and I just thought they knew heaps of stuff, but actually they only knew a little bit more than me. And the whole attitude, that sort of getting into the mountains, you just got out and did it.
Dave threw himself not just at the mountains, but took part in very challenging caving and whitewater rafting expeditions. Before moving back to Australia to spend most of the following decade rock climbing in the Arapiles, the go-to destination for Aussie climbers. He supported himself by fruit picking and other casual work. But in the end, it was the mountains that drew him back to New Zealand. And at the age of 30, Dave found himself in Wanaka with his partner Roz, an old car filled with skiing and climbing gear, and enough money to survive for a few months without working.
I mean, it didn't take long to notice that actually most of the alpine good stuff hadn't actually been climbed. And the canyoning is the same. I mean, no one had been canyoning. And that was just luck, that the canyons around Wanaka are probably the best ones in the entire country. You know, they're just right there and they're fabulous. Woo! We were the first people in New Zealand to really do it at all.
Dave and Ross set up New Zealand's first canyoning company, Deep Canyon, which became a very successful business. What does canyoning involve, Dave?
Descending confined waterways. And there's a whole range of different styles of rivers and streams and gorges and stuff. And the canyons around Wanaka tend to be quite steep just because of the nature of the terrain. So that means they're quite technical, that combination of tightness and fast-moving water. So that means quite a lot of rope work in the water, potentially kind of fraught. But it also means swimming and jumping and sliding. So anything you can't jump, slide or climb down, you're abseiling down. And it also means getting bloody freezing cold sometimes. And a lot of the higher end canyons are extremely committing. So once you get into it, you can't get out. And that adds a whole nother dimension to the trip. And there's beautiful, beautiful venues. You know, there's super water-worn rocks and beautiful deep green pools and lots of ferns and mosses. And it's a fantastic environment. Because it was really adventurous and it was really new and exciting. And so I really like taking people to those sorts of places. It was a really special trip. You know, I had people in tears with the beauty and wonder of it all. And lots of people were scared and thrilled and totally invigorated by the whole thing. Some people were pushed beyond their limit and they loved it and some people didn't. But, you know, it was super rewarding.
Dave also became a volunteer with the Wanaka Land Search and Rescue Team, valued for his expertise in alpine and canyon work, and was involved in a number of challenging rescues. Dave had been running the business for at least 10 years when another would-be guide appeared on the scene.
I had a very, I would say, suburban upbringing because it was kind of like suburbs on the edge of kind of industrial/farming areas. So I guess there was space to explore.
You weren't into tramping or anything?
No, I played netball, basketball, judo, city stuff.
This is Annette Phillips, formerly of Upper Hutt, a likeable and youthful 50-year-old who I talked to at her home within Kui of Brighton Beach, a Christchurch suburb.
And what did you do when you left home?
I gave skiing a go as one of my random jobs out of school and went, oh, actually this tourism thing's quite cool. And I did that in Nelson and that introduced me to a lot of outdoor sports, caving, kayaking. So I ended up in Wanaka in 2005 and just through friends got offered trainee guide job. And I thought it'd be nice to spend some time in Wanaka as well. And had a telephone interview with Dave and he was like, well, if you're keen to learn, we're keen to teach you. And I was like, okay, cool, that sounds fun.
This might be a bit of a leading question. So what sort of person was Dave?
Super enthusiastic and a really good teacher, yeah, and very at ease in that environment. Very at ease, but also he was, I wouldn't say conservative, no, he was very considered. Like he was very vigilant on safety, he always looked out for us.
Annette quickly adopted Dave's love of canyoning and exploration.
We'd be learning how to canyon and learning how to guide whilst we were exploring new canyons. Like that was how he taught us. You're dropping yourself into these amazing gorges that you don't see these environments any other way than actually putting on a wetsuit and taking a rope with you. Pretty harsh environment, yeah, and consequences high. Yeah, like, it's quite quirky, eh?
By 2011, Annette, now an experienced guide, had been working for Dave for 6 years. It was April, the end of the canyon guiding season, when Dave and Annette thought about doing a trip together, a fun trip without the responsibilities of guiding clients. They decided to have a crack at Stewart Creek Canyon, close to the Haas Pass. Dave Vass.
No, I hadn't done it before, and it was one of those creeks that is seldom done. It's a long trip and it's quite difficult. You can only do those gnarlier trips when the water flows are relatively low, and often that's later in summer. So with work and everything, we left late till late, and the days are getting shorter, and it's certainly getting a lot colder. And I only knew a couple of people who had done it, and they had said it was exciting and demanding and long and all that stuff. Oh, yeah, so Annette and I decided to go and do it.
And it's on our doorstep, like it's really close, 45 minutes from Wanaka. So it wasn't like we had to do a big drive down to Fiordland or anything. It was just like, oh yeah, we'll just go and do that canyon. Easy. Just past daylight savings, so slightly later start that we probably hadn't accounted for.
What time did you sort of set off?
Oh, the normal times, this would have been something like 8:30 or so, 9 o'clock maybe. Again, we probably should have done it earlier, but we were full of ourselves, and Annette's completely onto it. We were both fit and strong, we've been working all season.
So just a normal day trip. We had checked the topo and the map to figure out what length of ropes that we needed. So ropes, hardware, our harnesses, food for the day, first aid kit, just the usuals. Yeah, just out for a day jaunt really.
We thought we'd just smash it out, which largely we did, until.
So on the morning of the 18th of April, 2011, Annette and Dave drove to the bottom of the canyon where it emerges at Stewart Falls and started the climb to gain access to the gorge itself above the bushline.
It's up, you're walking up the wall of the valley and there's no trails, and you're looking for the most direct line because it all takes time, and you want the majority of the day in the canyon. You don't want it spent getting to the canyons. I do remember a couple of times we would stop, have a snack, sit down by a tree and go, taking a while, and then we got up into the subalpine above the tree line, and even up in there it was an hour longer, hour and a half. So by the time we got up there, we're like, mate, we're really going to the top of the canyon here. Like, we just kept walking.
Annette and Dave eventually reached a point where they could enter the canyon, higher up than they hoped.
So it's by April when we did it, it's not much margin for error for it getting dark. Something that we were anticipating would take about 6 hours or so. So it's probably about midday when we started, which probably is a bit late. There's a beautiful section at the beginning with open and sunny, and you're strolling along, splashing in the water, and you get to some little jumps and some little slides and some swims, and it gradually narrows in and it drops off. And then it goes into the bush. And then we started going down, and it got gloomier and it got definitely more serious.
It's not really practical to turn around and come back.
No, there's no going back at all, and generally there's no getting out, because you're generally between the walls of the gorge, which are too steep to climb out of. So you're very committed into going down.
The pair had no choice but to keep going down the canyon, with the hard bits still to come. They were mindful of the shorter days in April. It was getting darker earlier, and even more so down in the gloomy canyon.
I remember it just being late in the afternoon and being aware that it was late in the afternoon and still feeling like we had quite a bit of canyon to do. Oh, okay, that's all right. I guess we'll just keep canyoning. Like, what else are we going to do? There were a lot of jumps, there really were.
How do you go about assessing a jump? Because some of the heights he talked about seemed to be rather high to me.
Well, yes, I would have to say there were definitely jumps that we didn't scout. Generally, what would happen, good practice, would tell you that you would look at a jump and go, yep, I reckon you can jump that. Somebody would volunteer in the group, would put their hand up and go, I'm happy to go and check that. So they would find a way down. Generally, you'd be using a rope to get down into the water.
And one feature of Stewart Creek, which makes it fantastic, is because it's quite narrow and very water-worn, but a lot of the pools are super deep and obviously deep. Lots of jumps between 8 and probably 14 or 15 metres high, which is getting quite high. That's about as high as I ever wanted to jump. There were some that I think we decided not to jump that probably could have, but you know, it's a pretty serious spot, and so you tend to be a little more conservative. But at the same time, we felt in a hurry. I could add to that chain of events of feeling rushed and flustered, and I was actually kind of having quite a few personal dramas at the time. I'm one of those kind of I need to go in the mountains kind of things, and I knew it wasn't really the time to be doing it. And then even during the day, I don't think my mind was 100% on the job.
Dave's slight distraction and not being in the moment may have had a bit to do with what happened next.
We got down probably 2/3 of it. There was one section I remember we did a series of really brilliant jumps, and that was like big one, maybe 14-metre jump and a 10-metre jump, and this really good 12-metre jump, and we were in jumping mode.
With time pressing, Dave and Annette arrived at the top of yet another waterfall.
You got to this perfect pothole that the water just spouted out into the middle of, and it was quite small. It was maybe a pool that's maybe 5 metres across, sort of kind of foamy and very black and dark. And when you get that feature, that's a classic feature that usually means that that's a real pothole. It's really super deep. And that particular one looked really black. I wriggled out as far as I could because I couldn't really tell. So it was a bit unsure as to the depth, but it looked super deep. If I'd taken more time, we could have got around it. I was in a hurry, I was in the front, and I was feeling a bit pressure.
So Dave jumps into what he thinks is a deep and safe pothole at the base of the waterfall.
As it turns out, it was this really black rock, and it was shallow, but there was a lip on it that I just clipped with my heel.
His face just said it all as soon as his face broke the water, and I could tell by the look of his face it was not good, and he was just like, shit, I've just broken my leg. Yeah. I was just like, oh great, like shit, we fucked up.
Popped up and I swam to the edge, and I got to the end of the pool and pulled myself out and just went to stand up, just got this wave of pain and nausea. As I recall it, I sort of turned around and said, don't jump there, or something like that. And I just had this real startled rabbit in the headlights kind of response, and I just kept going. And I just crawled and wriggled and pushed my way down there for 15 or 20 metres or something until I got to some other spot and I stopped.
And I was like, all right, well, I need to get down there. And so then I looked around and I was like, oh, there was this really slimy, slippery ramp down on the edge of the pool. I was like, that looks pretty dodge, but probably safer than jumping at this point. Yeah, and then by the time I caught up with him, he was like, you can climb up out of there, I'll be fine here. It was like, we can't go any further, it narrows up and gets really steep again.
I remember looking up above it, and right where we were, there was just this big mossy wall and a big tree and a whole lot of roots, and it looked like you could climb up it.
With the daylight that we had left, it was like the best thing to do was for me to get out and raise the alarm, and so that was the plan.
Easier said than done.
Get out of the canyon, find my way back down, get into the car, and then drive to Makarora.
Annette states this quite matter-of-factly, but given their situation and location, there was also the small matter of Dave's injuries.
He'd already looked at it, and he couldn't weight bear on it, so I was just like, well, what else are we going to do? In hindsight, could have splintered it, maybe, just to keep it still, immobilise it. We did have some pain relief in the first aid kit, and he was like, yeah, I could probably make use of that.
It got me up onto a ledge a couple of metres above the river, and there was a better one further up in a big tree, but it was a bit of a drama to get there. And
I wasn't too concerned about the river level rising or anything, but as it turned out, that turned into a factor.
You didn't have GPSs then, or you didn't have Were PLBs available then?
Probably, yep.
Shame on you.
Yeah.
And so when you looked up at when he said, yes, you can get up here, what were you looking at, Annette? I'm used to a bit of understatement here.
Looking up, it was like there were a few shelves or a few terraces, and then you could see higher up above that the actual lip of the canyon. And there were little climby sections, but sections you wouldn't have wanted to fall for sure.
And is it wet and slippery, or what sort of was the...
It was vegetated but slippery, so you had to really think about where you were putting your feet and what you were holding on to. My concern was like, I've got to get out, this is on me now.
Annette eventually found a way up the mossy, near vertical wall.
So it took a couple of goes to get out of the canyon. I remember climbing up the first part and it actually didn't work. Yeah, so I had to stand back and have another look and go, where's my route here? And then when I got up out of there, I was like, okay, I don't know where I am in relation to how far down the canyon I am. So I was like, I better find some pretty good landmarks, because right now I'm the only person who knows where that other human is. Yeah. I actually stopped and I probably spent a good 5-10 minutes on the edge there, just looking around, getting really familiar with that place. And I built a little cairn out of some trees or something. I just made something really obviously human, because I didn't know what party was coming back.
Without those simple cairns, any search party would have had a hell of a job to find Dave.
And then I legged it. I also realised that I was in terrain that I hadn't been in before, because when we walked up, we were on a different route. So I stopped a couple of times on the way down, going, okay, well, where am I now? And if it's a walking party coming in, how am I going to tell these people where this guy is? So I stopped, I think, 2 more times on the way down and made little cairns for myself. And definitely legging it down, because then I was just like, I'm actually fighting daylight here. Got to the car.
Found Dave had the keys.
No, yeah, thank goodness. I think we might have had a chat about the keys, or I knew where they were before we left, and realised that I was like fully in go mode, because I'd done that whole bush bash down in my wetsuit. I hadn't even taken the top half of my wetsuit off. Got in the car, and then I was like, don't speed. Just drive normal speed. I remember telling myself that. And I was like, all right, get to the dock place.
The small community of Makarora was only a couple of kilometres away from their parked car, and was home to a small dock, Department of Conservation.
And then I just remember it just felt like just such a benign thing to do, then to get out of a car and just walk up someone's driveway and politely knock on the door. Like, it just was such contrast to this, mad, wild dash through the bush that I'd just done.
So you knock on the door, and then what happens in it?
I introduced myself, and I just said my friend's broken their leg in Stewart Creek. And they were like, right, we'll make some phone calls for you. Yeah, and they were looking at their watch, for sure.
And that was the docks people?
That was dock staff, yeah. And then that was it, job over for me for a while.
After the adrenaline of the dangerous climb out of the canyon and the frantic bush bash to the road and car, the reality of Dave's situation was now uppermost for Annette.
And that felt surreal. That was the most surreal feeling, because that's when I had time to just let it all sink in, because I had nothing to do anymore except wait. And now I was like, oh, this is what Dave's been doing since I've gone. He's just been waiting. It's like, oh man, I hope we can find him before it gets dark, but knew that that probably wasn't going to happen. So then that felt quite heavy. I was like, oh, my mate's up there and it's going to get dark and he's still going to be there.
So I just lay there, and after a while, I think Annette had gone, and then it got dark, and I went, oh, well, that was optimistic. And so then I went, oh, well, I'm just going to be spending the night here. I really didn't expect anything else to happen.
and then a helicopter turned up just with a spotlight. The hasty team arrived, a hasty team meaning a team that can move quickly and just gather information and try and locate, and then they've got more information to feed back to a bigger team to bring more resources in. And they were like, we just need to get up and have a look and gather as much information as we can before it gets any darker.
A vital member of the hasty team was softly spoken Davy Robinson, mountaineer. You heard him in a previous episode. A seasoned Wanaka search and rescue volunteer and a trained paramedic.
So it was late in the day, got a call. We did our normal two-person response with aspiring helicopters, James Ford flying. Got out there, hooked up with Annette, who was the person that had raised the alarm. She did a brilliant job of getting out of the canyon first and then getting down into Makarora to make the call and raise the alarm.
Annette was able to brief Davy on the injuries to Dave Vass.
With broken bones and stuff, I kind of think about 6 hours as a treatment window before permanent damage can happen. So say the bones misalign, trapped nerves, blood supply to extremities, etc., etc. So I'm always thinking that broken bones need to, although they're not life-threatening as such, we do treat them with a little bit of caution and that they can have life-changing effects. So with the impending bad weather, which did started coming in, and a really poor forecast for the next day, rising river levels in the canyon, knowledge that any sort of rescue next day probably wouldn't be helicopter, would be on foot. I think we just decided that we could get it done that night.
In charge of the hasty team was Sergeant Lionel Clay, a long-time police search and rescue coordinator, who would not only oversee the rescue, but make crucial decisions on the rescue attempt.
Lionel wanted to know my story basically, and then he made the call of, well, you better come in the helicopter because you know where he is. And so it was Lionel, myself and the pilot, and so it was just a little helicopter with a spotlight on it. They got up into the air and then found the canyon and then just started with the spotlight, just followed the line of the canyon up. And then I remember as part of that orientation when I got out of the canyon looking around to try and find landmarks, this is like etched in my memory. There was this big vertical wall on the opposite side of the canyon that was all black, that had this big black patch on it that was really obvious to me. And yeah, as we were heading up, I could see that. I was like, oh, he's going to be within 50 metres of this area.
All this time, of course, Dave Vass was still in the gorge, unaware what was happening, or even if Annette had got out safely.
I was woken, I actually went to sleep because I probably had a couple of codeines. When I woke up to the sound of a helicopter and I couldn't hear what it was and then where it was, and then I could see his light occasionally shining on the canyon walls and the trees below me and seemingly making its way up the canyon, which seemed a drama. I thought, crikey, that's dramatic. And then the helicopter did come into view and it hovered above me.
Dave had the presence of mind to shine his torch on his reflective emergency blanket. It was literally a lifesaver, allowing the rescuers to pinpoint his position in the gloom of the canyon at night.
And it was great. We're just like, yay, we know where he is. We know he's awake and alive.
I mean, they sort of hovered up there for a while and I figured, oh, well, they know where I am now. They can come and get me in the morning, they'll know where to come, kind of thing. And then I heard them making around up above and I thought, oh God, they're not going to land and try and come down the walls. I was a bit distraught at the fact that people might be getting on ropes and doing dangerous shit just to come and get me.
We went back to Makarora, but then it was just back to waiting again. And so they'd actually put a land crew on standby because they weren't sure if they were going to get a helicopter in there. And then they were back to, you know where he is. Would you be happy going in with the land team? And I was like, well, yeah, I will be. So I just kind of hung out in my wetsuit until we could figure out how we were going to get to this guy.
'Cause 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 '
The weather wasn't looking good, and we were like, getting the mission in before the weather turned. So if the weather turned, then we knew that Dave would be in there without food, without shelter. So we wanted to get to him regardless. There was potential for that land crew to go in that night.
And this might be a bit smarty after the event, but did you and Dave, had you checked out the forecast before you went in?
I'm sure we had. I don't know whether if that was part of why we'd decided to go that day, just to get in before the weather changed, or whether it was because that's when we had the time available. But often it is, you're chasing the weather in the mountains, aren't you? You're looking for your windows.
And the window was also closing for Dave. Although he had been located, with bad weather threatening and the fear of the river rising, decisions had to be made.
I think actually Lionel made the call when he saw where Dave was. We were in the helicopter, so when we did that first hasty check, he made the call then to get the resources of the BK because of the incoming weather, because of where he was. Yeah, he was just like, no, we just need the bells and whistles for this one.
The BK helicopter is a larger twin-engine machine used extensively for medical emergencies and with more capability than the standard ones used around Wanaka at the time. The problem was, it was in Dunedin, a good hour's flying away.
I was at Torrey and ended up going from Torrey through and then picked up 2 guys from the Wanaka SAR base.
This is Graham Gale, a very experienced rescue pilot, both at land and sea, who flew the BK from their base at Taieri Airport near Dunedin.
And then we went to a strip at Makarora, and by this stage it was dark. Stewart Creek, it's a tight little gully, but turn it into shitty weather and a shitty night, it's challenging.
Davy Robinson assessed the situation, as it would be him dangling at the end of the line for this risky nighttime pickup of Dave Vass, if it was possible.
The initial plan was to winch me into the canyon. I would detach, they would fly off, we'd get Dave ready, and then they would come back in, drop the winch cable again, then we'd come out.
With the BK now on site, with the winchman to lower Davy, the pilot Graham Gale, now on night vision goggles, was ready to go.
We had a very good briefing again, so we dropped all the extra gear out of the machine so it was light, so it performed a bit better.
14 years and hundreds of call-outs later, pilot Graham Gale still remembers this rescue.
And it took a wee while to actually locate them, just because of the density of the bush underneath, and it was a very narrow area, and we were still relatively high. I remember going up the creek, and it was dark and on the goggles, and I remember probably 30 odd, maybe 40 knots coming down the gully, and it was misty, murky stuff coming over the canopy and that. So it was a place that you would never really want to be at night, let alone up a gully, let alone going to an attempt to do a winch job. Like, it was out there as far as the winch jobs go, that's for sure.
When a helicopter pilot like Graham says it's out there, you'd better believe it. In the pitch dark, Graham is hovering above the canopy, looking through night vision goggles, getting directions from his winchman Doug, because he can't see the trees below, or to the side, or the cable beneath.
You do lose your depth of perception through the goggles, so you've got to be extremely close. Trees that you think you've got plenty of distance, they're probably only a metre outside your disc. But I'm using a combination, bringing my eyes up, looking through the goggles to actually just check my references, and then looking underneath the goggles to actually use the white light to actually get a decent reference off the trees. So, I'm using multiple points to actually help hold my position. And of course, I can't drift off site because then the cable's on an angle. It is tricky.
And are you getting feedback from your winchman as well to help you with your positioning?
Yeah, it's a continuous chatter that's going on in the machine. I'm pretty much saying very little, and Doug in the back is telling me to go clear left, go left one, up one, down one, go right one, go right two, go right three. He is actually directing me at that point, because in that particular machine that I was in, I'm flying it from the right-hand side and my hoist is on the left-hand side. So I have got no reference at all to the hoist. So I'm relying 100% on my winchman, crewman in the back actually directing which way he needs me to go.
Pilot Graham Gale says it took some time to get into the position to do the winch.
Definitely flying conditions were pretty tough.
This is an understatement.
The weather has deteriorated. Obviously it was dark, windy, rainy. It couldn't have got much more challenging. So it's a lot of responsibility on the pilot and the winchman to get those things right.
Flying at night, Graham had to find a way down through the trees above Dave Vass, an incredibly tricky and dangerous manoeuvre with no room for error. Many pilots wouldn't even have attempted it.
We were just coming back down the gully and Doug Flett, who was my winchman at the time, noticed a light source through the canopy.
So when we got into position and we were about to go out the door, the crewman grabbed me and said, "Pilot doesn't think he can get back in, so we're just going to hold position. Just get this done as quickly as you can." And I was out the door. So I was going down through the canopy, just a bit worried about getting caught up in the canopy and stuff, so you're kind of kicking branches and stuff away, and then came down.
I remember saying to Doug, "Is he on the ground yet?" He said, "I wouldn't have a clue." And I remember when we went through about 220 odd foot of cable, I thought, hell, I'm not going to have enough cable here. And to give him enough length for cable to make sure that we didn't run out, I remember nestling myself right down on top of the canopies on the trees, where my skids were virtually sitting in the trees, and had very little clearance off each side of my blades. So it was really tricky from that point of view, and our comms were probably not as good as what they are today. You need a situation awareness that you're looking ahead, you're looking out the side, you're thinking about what's behind you, and you're actually thinking about your execution of actually executing this winch, but then also being able to get yourself back out. There's no sense of getting yourself in there and getting caught.
Middle of the night, I was not expecting anything like that at all.
Dave Vass.
But in retrospectively, they made the call because the weather was coming in. Then the helicopter stayed above me and it started making its way down, and I went, right, it looks like they're coming to get me. Above me was quite steep, but then it opened out enough to, the trees weren't quite touching at that stage. And I saw someone come over on the winch and it was long. Well, maybe they're just going to drop me a pack of warm stuff or something like that. And it came down, and I spotted that it was Davey on the strop. And he came down and I got out on this rock. And as he came down, I said, "Are you coming to get me or what?" He goes, "Yeah, we're coming to bloody get you," in his Scottish accent. And they dropped him in the creek. And he ended up, in the water. Got all wet and he started cursing, and he was quite stressed.
He kind of slid across to me and grabbed my hand and just pulled me to the bank. I did a harness check on him.
Davey Robinson.
I think in his head he kind of thought we were just going to chill out and spend the night or something. I don't know. And I was just like, nah, we're going to go now, Dave. So we got him clipped in, checked his harness, and then we just signalled to come out. I just tried to hold his leg as best as possible, and we got pulled up through the canopy.
Got a wee bit of a spin on underneath, and I remember getting up and getting at the helicopter and crawling and being hauled into the helicopter. It took a while of backing up and going around trees to get back out again. He kind of seemed to have remembered his route through the trees, which I was, the trees were quite close, I could see them. And Lionel was spotting the trees out the back, and Pilot was flying on night vision. So that was all quite something, and then that was it.
Felt like it took ages for that BK to come back.
Annette Phillips.
And I don't know whether it did or not, but I just felt like I was at the cafe for a long time, just hanging out in my wetsuit.
So you're sitting there and then you hear the chopper coming back?
yeah, that was fantastic. It was really cool. And then that was all done and dusted, and then Landon got the crew out and then took off again with Dave. I think I might have gone over to see him, say hi. I was just still very much caught up in the rescue. And then Davey put his hand on my shoulder and was like, I'll drive you back. And that was just the best. I hadn't even considered. I just thought, oh yeah, now I just get in the car and drive Dave's truck back. And I just hadn't even thought that wouldn't be a good idea. So thank goodness that, yeah, the rescue team are onto it. They were just like, oh yeah, there's still another person to look after here. I went back to the canyon, I think 2 or 3 days later, or maybe the next week, with another canyon guide, Chris Warburton. And I just called him up and I was just like, hey Chris, would you be happy to come back with me? And he was just like, absolutely. And so he took the day off work and went on a day mission with me. Yeah, and that was amazing. I think that was super helpful just to debrief myself, because then I was able to relive the whole day with Chris and somebody who was a canyoner, somebody that I'd worked with, someone that had worked with Dave, somebody that just knows that kind of level of outdoor sport, of having big experiences. And we found my cairns on the way back, which was really cool. And then we got up to the top of the canyon. It definitely looked steeper than the day that I climbed out of it. And we actually abseiled back down and pick up the gear. So I think that was really helpful, just in terms of settling a story.
Annette is still an outdoors guide. Dave Vass recovered from his broken leg and continued his escapades.
I'd spent the bulk of my youth without much thought to consequences.
An extract from Dave Vass's autobiography. His life reads like a series of ripping yarns of a true adventurer. Days trapped by storms on our highest peaks. Extreme whitewater rafting, winter solo climbs, surviving an avalanche, canyon and cave exploration, first ascents, and the inevitable death of friends. It is many lives packed into one.
Do you need a hand with that?
I might just duck away while you do
Yeah, that'd be good actually.
Yes.
Been a bit of a palaver to get him into the RNZ studio in Christchurch.
Okay. Good as gold, yep.
RNZ's on the first floor and Dave's in a wheelchair.
It's easy to reflect on the irony of my accident.
He finishes with the story of an everyday climbing trip to the Darren Mountains in Fiordland.
The moment my life changes forever isn't much in the scheme of things. A minor event in the wilderness around us.
Only an hour or so from the road, a route Dave was holding broke.
For me, a route breaks, a hand fails to grab a saving branch.
And he fell 6 metres.
The fall, headfirst through the darkness, seems to take forever. And afterwards, I can't move. I've broken my neck.
From the point of view of you being in a wheelchair now, how do you view your past sort of exploits and the risks that you took, Dave?
I think that was kind of the theme of my book really, was that, I started off all young and keen and not particularly concerned with consequences. They're there. I mean, it's all pretty obvious. But you're so keen. And for me, it was just I'd totally found, it was mainly with climbing earlier on especially, this thing that this is me, this is my life, this is what I'm doing. And so, you can't regret following that. I never did. As well as being one of the unlucky few, I'm also one of the lucky ones. A few millimetres of spinal cord displacement less, and I could be perfectly functional. A few millimetres more, dead.
Next time.
So if I start crying on tape, I'm just going to bawl, all right? And it'll just let rip, but don't be alarmed.
The mental cost of finding and retrieving dead bodies. We hear from 2 people, a volunteer and a policeman, of the very real toll it took on them.
And there's mum and dad and the 2 kids are in the back. Still relatively intact, but all
checked them all very dead, and it was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that this morning.
That's next time on Search and Rescue NZ. Thanks to the producers of this series, Phil Vine, Justine Murray and Justin Gregory. Thanks to Ben Pearce, the engineer for this episode. Production coordinator, Brianna Juratich-Greg. Executive audio editor, Tim Watkin. Find and follow Search and Rescue NZ on your favourite podcast app or at rnz.co.nz/podcasts. Kia ora and thanks for listening.